Cool. So, thank you for that introduction. We'll get out of the way with the obvious. I'm not Air Force, so you may be wondering what I have to say to an Air Force group, being in the Army, being only at ADF for the past 20 months. Well, my insight is that because I'm Army, because I'm not Air Force, I've got a different perspective. One that's possibly more joint, given that I am now presenting to an Air Force perspective. So we're going to talk about technological challenges to aviation culture in the ADF. We're going to start with where I think aviation culture is, and when we're talking about aviation culture, I mean across all three services, so not Air Force culture. Then I'm going to briefly put up a statement about what I think it's going towards and not explain it. Then we'll look at some technologies, and then the future operating environment, and then I'll come back to where I think aviation culture is going and explain it with connection to what I've already said. So aviation culture today. I think it's summed up in these two statements, so people utilising technology and jointness. So when I say people utilising technology, I'm talking about a highly skilled workforce that utilises technology to effectively produce air power. It's synonymous to a person using a tool. Right? You're not integrated, it's not part of you. It's, I've picked up this screwdriver and I'm using it to screw in a screw. It's separate. And jointness I'm referring to, I'm just going to use the exact thing I wrote down, separate and distinguishable services cooperating to achieve an outcome. There's a quote from Dave Johnson, who, for those who don't know, is a retired US Army colonel, and he's currently the RAND Corporation in the US talking about strategy. And he presented here last week, and one of the quotes he had was about service. He said, each service fundamentally believes that they are the supported service and have the war-winning theory. Right? This prevents a common joint language and strategy to conduct wars. So the concept here is that while different services cooperate, Army cooperates with Air Force, cooperates with Navy, we aren't integrated yet. I don't necessarily have the same understanding of air-mindedness and of air power as an Air Force member does, and vice versa. They don't necessarily understand land power the same way I do. So that's today. Where do I think it's going? So I've summed up as a seamless integration of people, technology, and domains. And we'll explore this a bit more later. So let's explore some technologies, right? First, I want to sum up a basic trend with technology in the world. So growth. Now, I'm going to use an example from Major General Ryan. On the right, you have the Apollo computer used to guide Apollo 11 to the moon in 1969. On the left, you have the iPhone 6S released in 2015. Now, the iPhone 6S has 25 million times the power of the Apollo computer. That's pretty impressive, right? Contrast that with the iPhone X. This came out 2 years later and doubled the power of the iPhone 6S. In 2 years, we doubled the technological progress of the previous 46 years. There's a general increase in how fast the rate of technology changes. And this doesn't just apply to technology. This applies to your economies, to urbanization, to societies. It's a trend across the entire world in all aspects. And this is what Major General Ryan refers to as the quickening, although, to be honest, I'm not sure how long that phrase will last. So let's look at some technologies. Cloud computing. Cloud computing is, for those of you who don't know, linking computers through a network to produce a shared pool of computer resources that can be allocated and reallocated on demand in real time. Right? So this is essential to producing a networked force. Right? It reduces the need to have standalone computers that can run complex calculations in every asset. So instead of having one computer in every single aircraft that's a supercomputer and costs millions, you can have a mainframe and communicate that power out through networks. Right? So this is going to be really essential to producing power in the future. So how are you going to enable cloud computing? Space systems. Now, space is beginning to become its own domain, but in my perspective, it's sort of a bit overlooked. Right? We talk about it and mention it, but we don't really talk about why we need it. Right? Space domain controls your GPS, your communications, almost every aspect of being able to have a networked 5th generation or beyond force. If you don't have guaranteed connection to your space-based assets, and they aren't reliable, you've lost your integrity as to function and your ability to fight. So this leads into artificial intelligences. Right. When you're dealing with cloud computing and the massive amounts of data that you'll be communicating through space-based systems and across your Internet of Military Things, for those of you who don't know what that one is, that's your connected network of everything in the military, and it's only going to be growing. You're going to need artificial intelligences to be able to optimize these and ensure things are operating correctly, and to find data that has meaningful usage, not just some random thing out there, but stuff that you can actually action. Now, I've put intelligences. Most of you would go artificial intelligence as if it's a singular term, but it's important to recognize that when we talk about artificial intelligences and use them, it's not just going to be this one singular intelligence. You're going to be talking about multiple smaller artificial intelligence that may be running multiple systems or a single system, but operating together as an artificial intelligence team. So you're not going to have one intelligence. I think that's an important point to bring up. And this leads into autonomous systems. So autonomous systems are essentially fire and forget systems that will use a restricted version of AI, something that responds to a predetermined stimuli or to a preset stimuli in a predetermined way. It's not going to be able to independently think like you or I, but we'll be able to tell it how to react to different stimuli. And this is going to be a massive thing in the next 10 years. What you see there is the Boeing MQ-25 Stingray. This is a program being developed by the US Navy for air-to-air refueling. That's in progress right now. There's also the Boeing Loyal Wingman that's in development. There are many other projects that will be going ahead and come into fruition in the next decade that'll only build on the autonomous systems, both as supporting systems and killing systems. So where does this all lead? This all leads to human-machine teaming. None of these technologies will matter if they aren't paired with people. It is the people who will make these technologies relevant. All these technologies boost human cognition, their ability to make decisions. If you remove human from the equation, you don't actually have a solution. You're not actually producing anything. This is important because Clausewitz, of course I have to mention him, I'm in the army, he says that war is a human endeavor. It is a contest of human wills. Right? So it's not just one machine attacking another. That's not what war is. It might be a fight, but it's not war. So humans will always be part of this, and it's important because technology isn't a panacea. It's not going to come up with the creative solutions and implementations that we will. We will find ways to inventively use technology to solve problems. So the future operating environment. As I mentioned earlier, this is only getting more complex. It's only changing faster and growing more rapidly. Right? So technology, in this sense, is going to be required more and more to understand these complexities and to actually manage the rates of change. Without being able to do any of that, we will be behind the times on how to impact warfighting, how to design forces, all of that. So this leads into seamless integration of people, technology, and domains. This means people will be using technology as part of just their everyday aspects without really thinking about it. It'll be integrated part of, through human-computer interfaces, so it may be a chip in your head, or it may be still a separate computer. But your people will be using technology across all the domains simultaneously as part of a joint force to produce an effect. So I'm just going back to my notes. So for individuals, this means being technically adept. You need to understand what the technology is and how to use it. There's no use just knowing that artificial intelligence exists if you don't know how to use it. It means being resilient to rapid change. Now, when I say resilient, I don't mean resistant. You can't fight the change, nor should you. You won't be able to. But it means when this change is happening, you're not suddenly losing your head and wondering what's going on. You're able to adapt with it and maintain the pace with that change. And finally, for people, it means continuously learning. With all of this change, if you stop learning for even a second, you will be behind your adversary and probably lose. And that's not something we can afford in a growingly complex environment. And for institutions, this means being adaptable and pragmatic in how we design our forces, how we train our officers and soldiers, and how we procure new items. It means being willing to take calculated risks, so not unnecessary risks that don't get anywhere, but saying, this is a technology that might have applications. This is a possible solution. Let's try it. Right? And that leads into innovating rapidly and experimenting continually. As an institution, we have to be looking at these new elements and finding new ways to do things and experimenting them and keeping them at the forefront of what we're doing. If we aren't constantly experimenting and innovating, again, we'll be behind our adversary and losing. So on to people. I'll break these down just one by one. As people, we must not fall into the trap of believing that technology is a panacea to all our problems. We cannot think that if we just throw a technological solution at a problem, it will be magically solved. What will likely happen is we'll just produce new problems that will require human creativity to solve. I think technology is fairly well covered off amongst the whole presentation, so I'll jump over that to domains. Right? Cyber, space, air, land, sea. Those are the current 5 domains that are accepted. If you're not seeking to understand all 5 of them and to think about all 5 of them, you're not contributing to yourself as an officer, as a soldier, and you're not contributing to your service or to the ADF. It is everyone's duty to understand the other services, their mindsets, and their mission. That means I need to understand how Air Force fights and what they're doing and why they're doing it. That means Air Force needs to understand the same for Navy and Navy for Army, and all the way through. To fail in any of this means that we'll fail in the future when things are so complicated that we cannot afford to be a step behind and go asking people a basic question about how does the Air Force fight. So with that, thank you very much.